Welcome to House Education on February 10th. We are discussing proposed language from the AOE addressing chronic absenteeism. For the committee, I just want a little update on our miscellaneous ed bill, which is evolving in different ways. It's getting, what was in it is now being pulled out for a couple of reasons. Representative Long's bill about the inflator in Act 173, since it has money attached to it, we want to tie the miscellaneous ed bill down with that, so that'll be pulled out and just done separately. And chronic absenteeism is now living as a committee bill because it seemed kind of big to put into a miscellaneous ed bill. So that's why you see different things assigned to it. We had testimony last week before from AOE concerning this. We had them come in again with follow-up questions, and now it's time to get some reaction from the field. And so with that, we have the Vermont Principal Association in this afternoon. And Jay, the floor is yours. Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And we do agree that it should be a separate bill. There's nothing that it merits that. So for the record, Jay Nichols, Senior Executive Director of the Vermont Principals Association. The VPA agrees with the Agency of Education that chronic absenteeism is an issue nationally and in the state. We also agree that the tools we've used need to be updated, including statute Title 16. In Vermont, as long as I can remember, we've had more of a legal context where we've approached this with truancy. As a superintendent, different counties would try to tackle it their own way. I brought the Franklin County superintendents together. We came up with a rule about on X day of being absent, you'd have a letter, and on the 10th day, there'd be another letter, and the 20th day, and then the state's attorney would get involved. And trying to have a statewide response makes sense to us. 5 points that we wanted to talk about here related to early intervention and prevention approach, which we believe is the way to go. Researchers consistently find chronic absenteeism is strongly linked to lower standardized test scores and learning loss. Obviously, you can't show a correlation there, but it's certainly causation. There's a reduced likelihood of grade level reading proficiency in early grades. That's shown nationally as well as in Vermont. There's an increased risk of long-term negative outcomes like dropout, unemployment, economic inactivity in adulthood. So principals can share examples of students who struggle with issues of absenteeism that lead to behavior problems. This is pretty consistent. All of this is connected. Students who are at school regularly and participating in the fabric of the school and involved in programs and after school programs and school on a daily basis are much more likely to be successful. And they're a lot less likely to be regularly absent regardless of the reason. So absenteeism hurts no matter what. So whatever we can do to have kids be in school, we should be looking to do. It's particularly important for students of low income backgrounds, historically marginalized groups, and disadvantaged communities. They tend to have a higher chronic absentee rates, suggesting that absenteeism exacerbates longstanding educational inequities. For example, kids that are struggling with issues of homelessness or housing insecurity, there's a huge impact there, and those kids tend to be more likely to be absent. Early grades, especially kindergarten, often show the highest chronic absence, underscoring the importance of early intervention. I should mention that a number of states, I think it's 20, it might be 21 or 22, require kindergarten for students and families. I know we don't do that in Vermont. I personally think we should be at least giving that some consideration. The earlier we have students in the system, the sooner we can provide necessary support for them. It's much harder to improve attendance patterns for a middle school student or a high school student than it is for an early child student. So ultimately, early intervention, especially in elementary grades, we believe shows better results than waiting until later grades. We would expect that chronic absenteeism would be reducing since the end of the pandemic. And I think the AOE spoke to this a little bit, that it is reducing some since the pandemic. Statistically, we're seeing that trend across the nation. However, all of the research that we've looked at so far has shown that chronic absenteeism nationally and in Vermont is still higher than it was prior to the pandemic. So it's certainly a problem that we should be looking at trying to tackle. Additionally, we've seen some data. I actually testified in Senate Judiciary the other day about this, that indicates in places in which there have been major chaotic immigration and customs enforcement actions, that those communities are really struggling. Talked to a person, I won't mention the school, but it won't be too hard for you to figure out this weekend, where they have some kids that are kind of afraid to leave basketball practice because they walk home and they're worried about being picked up. And, whether we think that would happen or not, it has happened in other places, and our kids are concerned about it. And they're seeing some of these kids not coming to school, or parents choosing at the younger grades just to keep the kids home, and kids at the older grade, going to school with a bunch of other kids, but not staying around for after school program because they're afraid of walking home by themselves at 8 o'clock at night. So that is a legitimate concern. Again, chronic absenteeism is a complex, persistent issue. We think that current research talks about family engagement, early intervention, whole family support systems. We think those are the most highly evidenced methods for trying to improve the issue. We think strong, proactive communication between schools and families, positive outreach rather than punitive, is one of the most effective strategies. I tried to find research on this from 2 years ago and I couldn't find it. I don't know where I put it, but there was research about texting and schools actually texting parents and kids that were being absent a lot. And just that alone, by sending them a message, text message, hey, we missed you yesterday, really want to see you in school tomorrow, Freddie. That right there reduced it by itself by like 10%. So just trying to say, we miss you, we want you here, makes a difference.
Are we taking questions at the end or perhaps?
For me, it never matters.
Go ahead.
I'm in that idea that you're talking about right there. I'm just wondering, do you think that rubs up against the phone-free law that we passed last year with not using text for like practices and right.
Great question. It's before school, it's at night.
And it was text. Ours was about social.
It is a text, yeah.
Right, but it covered texting as well. No, they could use text.
It's one of the reasons when we testify, we said, be careful about going overboard. We want to be able to communicate to our kids.
Yeah.
I think just a general message from the classroom teacher saying, Leanne, really missed having you in class yesterday. Or if you're a little kid, to Leanne's parents, oh, we really missed having Leanne yesterday.
Yeah.
The research seems to show that does make a difference.
I totally believe you and understand that concept.
Yeah.
It seems like we said in that law, right, there was a part about needing to have records and like use specific apps to communicate. So, and maybe it's different if we're communicating with parents.
Right.
I just was curious your opinion if that seems like hypocritical.
I think we want to be able to communicate with parents any way that we can.
Yeah, okay.
Again, there's no police out there policing our policy.
Right.
It's about using common sense.
And then so I gave you a couple key themes from the research. So chronic absenteeism remains higher. The new normal attendance crisis needs sustained attention. Causes are multi-layered. Gave examples of health engagement systems, external shock. And when I say external shock, I mean things like situation with ICE and those types of things. So solutions must be holistic, not only punitive or administrative. I grew up in the punitive system. I was the principal in the school where the mother went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now I just got there and they weren't sending their kid to school and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the parent was exonerated. She had a baby. She was nursing the baby in jail. It was a heck of a mess. I was the principal of that school the next year. So I walked right into a landmine as a principal addressing this issue. And it was all punitive. It was not really the positive outreach type things that schools are trying to do a lot more of now. And I do think you have to have a stick. But I think we got to use the carrot a lot more. Family engagement and early interventions. I mentioned that already. And schools should prioritize those strong partnerships. And then programs addressing students' basic needs improve attendance. We know that. Research is clear. That's why community schools model works. So we need wraparound services for families. And that means we need to have partnership with Agency of Human Services, mental health providers. We need to make sure that kids' basic needs, we've all probably heard of Maslow. We've got to take care of their basic needs before they can be functional in school. And I'm so worried about where I'm going to sleep at night or getting the next meal. It's hard for going to school to be a priority for me. In terms of the proposed bill, we have one area change that we are concerned about that is under the area of suspension or expulsion of students. Section E is proposed language that says, a public or an approved independent school shall provide access to alternative education such as tutoring, instructional materials, and assignments to a student during any period of suspension of 3 or more days. We would respectfully request that the word shall be replaced with may. We are very concerned about unfunded mandates always. Schools often do not have the resources to really provide alternative education and tutoring. On a drop-in call with elementary principals this week and high school principals last week, we brought up this language and people were like, parents are going to come to us and say we have to provide tutoring. We can't even get substitute teachers. How are we going to provide tutoring? What if our teachers refuse to do tutoring outside of school? What if the kid's so violent that we can't even tutor the kid in the local library? These are real issues that schools come up with. So they would really request that shall be replaced with may. A lot of schools already provide work and stuff like that, but we want to be clear. The real learning, the magic in the classroom happens when Leanne and Aaron and used to be Beth are in the classroom working directly with kids. That can't be replaced with a worksheet or some module like that. Has to be that actual relationship in person. So we would ask you to give that some thought. When students are suspended out of school, it's almost always for a safety reason.
Yeah.
Occasionally it's a policy reason. We've tried hard to BPA. I think BSA and VSBA have too, to get rid of stupid policies. We used to have a policy across the state, if you guys remember, where if you were caught smoking, it was a automatic 5-day suspension with no other consequence. And so if people remember that whole situation in Mount Abe, like 100 kids lit up cigarettes so they could go deer hunting for the whole week. So we've tried to get rid of policies like that. I think that, yeah, they're pretty smart. I think we're in pretty good shape overall policy, but that's something we would ask you to take a look at. And that's my prepared testimony.
Okay. Thank you.
The questions?
Thank you. Well, I was going to ask, what particular to the bill do you have concerns with? And is there anything here that you would consider to be an unfunded mandate? You sort of answered both.
One.
Yeah.
I like the bill. I was part of they brought out a big convening, they brought people together, and I don't also agree with the AOE on this. I think they've really done some good work. I think they're heading in the right direction. They worked with the state's attorney, the state's attorney's office. There was a real problem for a while where some counties were really aggressive because they had judges and state's attorneys that were aggressive. And, again, I put together the group in Franklin County. It's probably 12 to 15 years ago now. And we met with state's attorney who was there a long time. Can't think of his name right now. Anyway, nice guy. And he said to us in a meeting, 5 superintendent, Grand Isle was with us, 5 superintendents sitting in a meeting. And he said, I cannot bring these to judge. The judges will not hear these cases. They told me not to bring these unless it's a CHINS petition.
Right.
And we actually had an example as a superintendent. That's the kid commits a crime or something, or some big safety issue. So we had a child that needed supervision. Yeah. So we had a kid broke into the Franklin Memorial Bank. He was a 6th grader. He'd already missed 70 days. I reported all kinds of stuff. I was the superintendent, the principal, done everything we could. We went to the family's house. Kid never would come to school. He finally broke into the bank and got caught by the police. And then the judge did get involved. And as a condition of his not going to juvenile detention center, he had to come to school every day. And if he got kicked out of school for behavior or whatever, then it went back to the judge. And that kid came, obviously, I shouldn't say his parents moved to another town, but that kid did come back to school for a week or two before they moved. So I do think you do need some teeth too. Yeah.
So when I was on the school board, we had to deal with expulsion hearings usually.
Yep.
Again, hunting season, kids come to school with a gun in their car.
Yep.
And there was always a discussion about providing alternative education during expulsion period.
Yep.
And it seemed like it was the law already.
Special ed.
Specialized.
Okay.
So if I've got special ed services where I get 30 minutes of extra reading instruction a day,
Yep.
the school district legally has to provide me that.
Okay.
Other than that, if it's an expulsion hearing, they do not have to provide me that.
What, a suspension, or is there?
Suspension, same thing. They don't have to provide me anything with suspension unless I'm special ed. Now, most schools will, and the kid's going to come back there, and they should. And as a superintendent, I would also recommend that they would in certain cases. If a kid was in the building threatening people all the time, we didn't want to have that kid back in the building or expose our staff to that. But we might support an online school or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
But currently, there's no legal obligation to provide at a minimum homework that the student might be missing, or,
No,
okay. It may have been a policy, not a.
it could be a policy. I think a lot of times superintendents will recommend that. I always did. And boards, they want to see the kids succeed, so we try to provide ways for them. The one, just so you understand how suspension works in Vermont, expulsion means, we know what expulsion means?
You're having school forever.
No,
Until the end of the year, right?
to the end of the year or 90 days, whichever is greater.
Okay.
When we first passed the law, you first passed the law, it said to the end of the school year. And then we had a kid actually attack a teacher and a principal. It was like June 7th or something, and they had to miss 3 more days of school. Then they had to come back the next day. So the legislature fixed it then. So now it's 90 days or the end of the school year, whichever is greater, with one exception, and that's the gun-free school center. And that is 365 calendar days. So if a kid brought a gun to school and was actually threatening people, a board could put the kid out of school by federal law for 365 days, one calendar.
would that also count, and I know they're not supposed to do this, but it does happen. Would it count if it was like locked in the gun rack of their truck in the parking lot?
Yes, but under the Gun-Free Schools Act, Section D says if they didn't intend, the board
Okay.
has flexibility,
Yeah.
some language like that. The kid brings a pocket knife. One year I had 5 kids that brought knives to the tech center because the teacher didn't have enough knives and
Yeah.
kids brought them to school to give to the teacher. We ended up having to have a hearing over that. So, but there was no intent. They were trying to be helpful.
Ben Brady.
This is definitely not just like, you're here, so help us answer questions.
Fine.
What, if a kid is expelled, what does the school or the LEA still responsible for?
Special education.
Only special
services.
education services? So if the student is not on an IEP, there's no services, no tutoring?
You can provide them,
Man.
and we would argue that you should, but you're not required to. My next testimony is on the Conlon bill at Senate Ed. You guys haven't been talking about it, and I will testify. Isn't that great?
No, I can't edit the YouTube videos.
Thought I'd throw that in.
All right. Yes, oh yeah, especially on this topic.
You mentioned the highest rates are among students who are unhoused or homeless. And the part about community schools, do you anticipate that if we move to regional schools or closing small elementary schools in towns, that will exacerbate chronic absences, especially in those more vulnerable populations?
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I think a lot has to do with the fabric around the school and the school system. So if you've got a high functioning mental health system, several years before the pandemic, we had a meeting with Agency of Human Services. President was the person who comes out of retirement, takes jobs all the time during the pandemic. Thank you.
Oh, Mike Smith.
Thank you, Mike. So we had a big meeting with Mike and his group and stuff there. And then the pandemic came out a few weeks later. And we were saying at the time that the North Country area mental health system, the whole system was like collapsed and they had you couldn't hire any employees. And our principal and the superintendent there were all really worried about getting services to kids. And then we'd be talking to people in Chittenden County and they'd be talking about what an unbelievable partnership they had and how well it was going. So I think it does depend on the area. I think the more geographically isolated you are and the less high functioning your local service agency is, the more likelihood there is to have those problems. I think it's a legitimate concern.
So in this proposed bill, one thing that always makes me nervous is we've got a list. A student's absence for all or part of the day may be approved for the following reason: physical or mental illness of the student, family emergency, quarantine at home, student's medical, dental needs, family observance of religious holidays, legal activities such as a court appearance, driving examinations, college or post-secondary program visitations, legal or administrative proceedings related to the placement of the student by the state, absences due to the transitions in the student's living situation as a result of the student experiencing homelessness, pre-enlistment or deployment activities of the student or their parent or legal guardian, or other reasons not specified above with the approval of the secretary. So there's one thing not here that has been discussed, and that is in the case where we have an HHB complaint and sometimes for the student's well-being, I don't know if we can really say mental health, that student may want to not be at school for a couple of days. Do you think that something like that should be added?
I don't think you're going to ever be able to make a list that's going to cover everything. I think if you leave it up to the superintendent to say that that's fine, and if necessary to get permission from the Secretary of Education, I think I'd be more comfortable with that.
This says other reason not specified above with approval of the secretary, but would that mean that
I'd rather it be permission of the superintendent personally.
That was gonna be my question.
That's what it is now, basically.
A little closer.
Yeah, I just think that they're going to know the situation better, and then they don't need to be adding more stuff for the secretary to do.
Right.
She's got plenty to do.
when a student turns 18, they can essentially excuse themselves from school?
Not essentially, they can.
You can't.
Yeah, I'm talking did all the time, mostly being late.
I have a grandson that's the same situation, yeah. Yeah, once they turn 18 and, you know, parents shut off the microphone right now, but if this kid goes to school and says, I don't want you to share anything more with my parent, then the parent's done.
Well, there's
Frustrated.
paperwork you have to sign, at
Yeah.
least at our school.
You got, there's paperwork you have to sign. The kid can tell you, I'm in charge, and the kid is in charge.
Yeah.
All right, so then I'm gonna,
That would be another change.
so I've got two recommendations now from you then. Section E that you talked about, and perhaps within the list of approved absences at the discretion of the
I would
superintendent.
rather it be at the superintendent, yeah. I think that makes more sense.
That does make more sense. in many ways.
That's a follow-up question on it. So not approval, I want to say it's low down, but principal, you'd want it at the superintendent.
I think it should be at the I think it should be at the superintendent. It takes the principal out of the firing line.
Just want to make that clear. I would agree with it. Okay. Thank you.
I find myself a little torn about the requirement that educational services be provided to a student not at school. But I'm very sensitive to any unfunded mandates right now.
Especially right now.
Those to the greatest extent possible. Help fix
I
that.
just,
Or you just leave it may, and it could be, frankly, it could be on the AOE when they come up with their model policy to make that part of the model policy.
I was going to say, the reason that someone would be suspended or expelled is often a safety reason. So they may not be in a place to be willing or able to access the service, but you're requiring you to provide it, whether they can access it or not, is what I have experienced in the
That's right.
past.
I mean, that puts,
Leaving it at may,
Yeah, we've had cases where people have used the public library and the
They
student in
can't
question
read.
student in question has ripped books off the shelf and the librarian and the public library said, that kid can't come here anymore.
been dangerous to the tutor,
Yeah.
going to their home.
And yeah, we've had tutors attacked. Yeah, that stuff happens. It's not a law. It's not frequent, but I think the May language takes care of that.
Thank you.
so I wouldn't mind putting a little bit of closure on this with the committee. If we have legislative council do some tweaking here, change, is everybody comfortable changing the shall to a may? And is everybody comfortable with number 12 in the list with the approval of the LEA superintendent?
Yes.
We may need to get some counter programming from the AOE on that, but we'll have legislative council. And anything else on here that you'd like to bring up otherwise?
No, those were, the other one I didn't even think of was the second one that you brought up. I wasn't really thinking along that lens, just the may shall was our biggest concern, but that's a good catch. It should be the super.
Well, this HHB thing has come up a number of times.
And we'll continue to.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of like the punitive angle of this, I mean, the goal of this really seems to be to back away from the fines and court and all of that. And you guys are.
Yeah, I think there's still going to be still be a truancy
Yeah.
piece to this that will have to be enforced and that the AOE will work with trying to make that stronger, working with the law enforcement agencies and state. And we certainly support that. At some point, there has to be a stick, but wherever possible, we'd like to, and to be honest, if we get a streamlined, I mean, we get calls at our office all the time from parents that are mad at their principal. So they think the principals work for us. And they'll call and they'll say, my principal sent us this letter that said, and I'll say, yeah, that's the required letter that was sent because a lawyer wrote it that way. And, don't over worry about it. And I explain that. If all the letters come out across the state are the same, everybody has the same understanding, I just think it's gonna be better for everybody. It's also gonna be better for the family or the kid that moves frequently, which oftentimes are kids that we're talking about here.
So just for everybody, I mean, this bill essentially does two things. It tells the AOE to come up with a model policy and then adopts the changes within sort of the truancy law that makes it less punitive and more collaborative. All right. Well, great. Thanks. That was very helpful.
I'll be in Center Ed if you need me. Take care of those pens.
I'm gonna watch it later.
Never mind, it's not on the agenda. I was gonna say, might take advantage of while you're here. You could preview your testimony with us if you wanted to.
Your call.
All right, fun.
We have time to kill. I would, why don't you do that and we'll just update it.
We want to hear it first.
Yeah, that's.
No, it's just,
that.
the draft Matt.
So, well, I'm not gonna read from it, I'll just talk to it. What we're gonna say today in Senate Education, I hate to say that, this in here, we're gonna thank Representative Collin, for putting out an initial map for people to take a look at it to start from. But we're gonna keep our comments, we're not gonna talk at all about the maps. And the reason for that is, I saw them the same time that you did. I know you're gonna be talking about them, so I'm gonna focus instead on the rest of the language in the proposed bill as Beth presented it and as Peter and Beth worked on it. So we're gonna say that we agree with having policies and procedures for delivery and instruction be set up by the local school board, knowing that what local school boards is gonna be different, depending on where you folks end up in May or June or July or whatever. We're section 2A, we're gonna talk about how the cleanup language as we move to bigger districts to provide opportunities to designate students where there isn't a local school, public school close by. We're gonna support that. Under parameters, we're gonna say you folks need to establish what reasonable means. So we're not taking a stance on that at all in terms of how far away. We are gonna mention that the language 3 or fewer in current law, we're okay with that language, but we're not sure if the number 3 is appropriate or not. We think it depends on how big the districts become.
I'm sorry, you kind of rushed through it as I was trying to.
All right.
Would you mind repeating that again?
The language 3 or fewer that's in current law regarding designation.
Yeah.
I think you've heard me testify about this in the past. If the districts become very big, we're gonna ask to take a look at that language, and we really believe it should be left up to local boards. And my concern is simply if you get this a big enough unit, and on this side of the unit, there's no schools there serving those grades, but there is a school that's just outside of that unit that's only 15 minutes away. I don't want those kids driving an hour and a half. So I just think we need to be thoughtful, potentially flexible on that designated 3. And I'm not saying your map, that doesn't work or not. I don't know. Something to think about.
Well, I just, as a preview for the committee, I've worked with legislative council on some of this language, and it actually, without us ever having talked about this, reflects some of that concern. And I'll be bringing it to the table later the week.
Great, good, great. Section 2B1, contract, we are 100% in agreement. We absolutely should have a contract that displays the terms and conditions when a child is sent from a school that's responsible for the education of the child to another school that's delivering the education, whatever that looks like. So if they're going to an independent school, if they're going to another public school, that because they don't offer the grades in their town or their district, then we believe there should be a contract. In terms of approved independent schools, we totally agree that they need to provide special education. That's a simple fairness thing. We want attendance reports. That's been an issue that our members have had, not having attendance reports, kids not showing up for school, and the sending schools been paying for them for months and they haven't been in school in months. We hear cases of that every year.
Can I stop you right there?
Anytime.
So that comment you just made, is that covered in the chronic absenteeism bill that we're putting out? Do you feel?
I haven't even given a thought.
Because it does talk about approved independent schools providing that. Would you mind when you get a chance? No,
Yeah.
just sort of say,
Raise my-
because that has been an issue for years. And, if education transformation stalls, it'd be, if the chronic absenteeism bill can address that, or if it already does address that.
Okay, I will take a look at that. That's what you say. I can't say anymore. Academic progress, same thing. If there's test scores and stuff like that, then the academic progress should be shared. That's certainly a flaw of the current system. We say boards simply pay the bill and are not privy to how well or not their students are doing academically. We need to fix that. Suspension and expulsion is another area that needs to be adjusted. We have heard of cases where kids have been expelled, kids going to school in another state, public school, and then the school that's sending them not finding out about it, or kids going to a approved independent and not finding out about it. That shouldn't happen. The superintendent should be the first person to hear about that. We fully support, this will shock you, the Vermont Public Accommodations Act, the Vermont Fair Employment Practices Act. Fully support those. This is also, I've been saying for 15 years, so it's fairly easy for me. We agree that admission process should be blind. No question about that. We think that knowing how well students do on state or federally mandated assessments not the most important thing, but it is one critical aspect when we look at how a school is doing in terms of performance. So we think that that should be shared with the public school that's sending the kids. We should not be charging any fees for being a student at any school that receives public funding. That's a very important one for us. And we have no problem with assurances from independent school leaders, signing assurances like superintendents do now. And I'll say we have a great deal of confidence that school leaders of independent and public schools all want to provide the best education they can for their students. We ended by just saying we support statements of non-discrimination and assurances that state that schools are following the Vermont Public Accommodations Act. And we finished by saying VPA doesn't see a path forward in our educational delivery system without partnership with our 4 historic academies. We need them as part of our system. That's kind of the nutshell what I'm going to say today.
Yes, all right, questions?
I'm just
Representative
gonna,
Walsh.
thanks, just related to that list that you just, did you think about anything that might be missing?
No. I did not. I just respond to what they had there.
Okay, so it's not that you didn't think something was missing, it's that you just responded.
I just responded to, yeah, and I did not respond to the maps themselves. And they're probably going to ask questions about that today, but yeah, that's going to change it. I did hear, why did Barry get lumped with something and not something else? And I just, from a couple of people sent me emails today and I said, I have no idea. The committee is going to be talking about that stuff. It's just starting there. You're welcome. Well, that's true.
You got a Brady?
This is not in your written testimony, but I know it's something I've heard you talk about many times, and often your explanation is clearer than the way I'm able to articulate it. So I wonder, just having a conversation earlier today with the vice chair about districts versus supervisory unions. And wonder if you could share why you would support one structure over another and what are the real impacts of one versus the other. And I know for some reason you have like this beautifully clear way of explaining it, but I
No pressure though.
Me just-
struggle.
I just stumble all over myself right now.
So, yeah.
So to me, the big difference is there are at least 3. The 3 biggest differences are a supervisory union is a loose confederation. And the employees in that confederation have different bosses depending on what school that they actually work for. They may work for the supervisory union. Say I'm an art teacher that's shared across buildings, or I'm the superintendent. I work for the supervisory union board. I'm a principal in one of those school districts or a teacher in one of those school districts that works just in that school district. I'm an employee of that school district. And that permeates all across the system. And it's also true with students, which I have a major problem with. So where it matters is in terms of kids, it matters if a kid moves. If a kid moves from one town to another, or if the town next door has a program that this town doesn't have, the kid can't access. The best example I can give is when I was superintendent of Franklin Northeast, when it was a full supervisory union. It's still supervisory union, but the 2 high schools are now their own school district. Back then it wasn't. I had kids at Richford, brilliant kids that were taken, they could get 2 or 3 AP classes. Kids at Enosburg could get 9 or 10. And we had a bus going between 2 schools because we had a shared tech center. And I could not allow those kids to access those classes because they belonged to different districts. The second big thing in terms of kids is when kids moved, they had to change schools. If you have a supervisory district and a kid moves from one town to another in that district, you don't have to have them change schools. You could, but you don't have to. You could say, you've been going to Orchard School in South Burlington. You had a lot of issues before. You've been here 3 years. We finally got it figured out. Now you're in the Chamberlain catchment area. Well, we're going to keep you right here at Orchard because you're doing well, Johnny, and we want to keep you there. If you were separate districts, can't do that. You can't say to a kid from Peacham who moves to Barnet, hey, it's okay, you can keep coming to Peacham. Kid's going to have to go to Barnet. Even if Peacham's brought in all the services and is finally having success with his kid, he's still going to have to go to a different school. So I give the example of Hannaford's and Price Chopper all the time. Supervisory union is like Hannaford's and Price Chopper. Supervisory district is Hannaford's. We all have the same employer. We all work for the same company. We all follow the same policies. If you're going to lay me off, it's within this bigger district. And so if I've got seniority and I'm an English teacher and my high school has 4 English teachers, but they say next year they only need 3, but the other high school in the supervisory district or the middle school, if I get the license, needs a teacher, I get a right to that job as long as I'm qualified for it. And a supervisory union, I can be the best teacher in America. But if I'm the last one in, even if there's openings in other towns, they don't have to give me that job.
I'm going to just follow up on that, not with a question, but with more of a statement. So when I was part of a supervisory union, our little town of Cornwall had a little school with a small number of staff, and we simply just churned through the last hired teachers. Sometimes they were fabulous. They had no job security because if we lost 5 kids, their job was gone, and they had no rights to any other job in the SU because it was different contracts, different employers.
I've also had health insurance problems with too, by the way. So I had a nurse who was in 2 different buildings, and she was not, she was 80%, so she wasn't 50% in either building, and she couldn't get health insurance. Now we get around that, but it took us a couple of years. We made her a supervisory union employee. We did it that way, but then you're billing back and you're dealing with all this convoluted stuff that supervisory unions create that you don't need to have. And you don't need to have 7 or 8 different board meetings. Focus on having one strong board with good policy, and you're going to end up getting better results. And we don't need 119 superintendents. And right now we got 51, but maybe we don't need 51. One per district is what the model should be.
The other place where I watched the switch be highly beneficial was during COVID and being able to move staff around where the greatest need was. And it was really highly effective.
Agreed.
It was, there were no contractual issues, nothing like that.
We don't want COVID back. There are some things we learned from it that we could take advantage of. Any other questions for me?
Further? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you did have a hand up previously.
I was wondering, you talked about you support the blind admissions. I do too. Is there an exception if it's a performance-based school, like a ski school? I mean, how does that work?
They don't give public funding.
Some of them
do.
now do though, some of them.
Brown Academy.
Well, my argument would be if they're getting public funding, then it should be blind admission.
Even if they're.
But I'm not going to apply to a ski school.
Right.
I can't ski, and I can't ski.
I mean, I agree. I was just curious if in that there was any nuance in there.
I think it should be blind admission, and any kid who wants to apply for it can, and then you figure it out.
Thank you very much for taking the time. Did you have written testimony on?
Yes.
Okay,
That's got it.
but not on the chronic absence.
Yes, written testimony on chronic absence, I sent it to Matt.
Okay, but since we added this on, if you have chronic,
I do, and it's, Daphne has it, and, I can send it to Matt.
that would be great.
Okay, glad to do that.
Thank you.
Appreciate
All
it.
right,
Thank you.
let's take 15. We'll be back at 2.